Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel Paxton. I'm glad you could join me here today. Hopefully you can see me and hear me. If you have any problems during the broadcast, seeing me or hearing me, sometimes it's on my end, and sometimes you just need to refresh your screen if the internet isn't working for some reason. Let's see. Somebody says they can only see the standby message. Hold on just a second. Oh, now I can see me. Okay, good. I know all this technology is a little confusing sometimes, but usually it ends up working in the end. So hopefully you can see me and hear me all right. I don't have my microphone muted this time like I did last time. That was kind of embarrassing. So hopefully everything's working now. Let me know if you have any questions. You can ask me questions by typing them in the chat box. That's the only way that you can communicate with me right now. But if you type your questions in there, I can see them, and I will try to make sure to answer them as I go along. And at the end, if I've missed any, I'll go back and make sure that I haven't missed any. You should have gotten a couple emails from me today about the workshop today. So you can also, if you don't want to talk with me in the chat box, you can also reply to one of the emails I sent you today and get a hold of me that way if you have any questions for me. So again, my name is Rachel Paxton. I'm the owner of the website creativehomemaking.com. I send out a weekly newsletter with my favorite recipes and cleaning hints and things like that. And I have, in the past year, started teaching some online courses where I'm teaching you how to do canning and pressure canning, and also how to bake homemade breads and rolls. So hopefully that's why you're here today. Today's workshop is about how to pressure can pulled pork. So if that's why you're here, that's what we're going to learn how to do today. And at the end of the presentation, I'll give you some information about signing up for all of my canning courses if that's something you're interested in. But I will give you all the information you need today to can pulled pork and how to use a pressure canner. And after the workshop, I will send out a video, a replay of this presentation. So if you weren't able to watch the whole thing or you missed part of it for some reason, you'll have 2 days to watch it before I take it back down. And I will also send you the recipe and a supply list so that you don't need to worry about writing down all the directions. If you want to try making this later, I'll send you the recipe so you don't have to write the recipe down. So anyway, I think that's about it. I'm going to switch over to my slides so I can show you how to make pulled pork. Okay, good. Everything's working today. All right, in today's workshop, I'm going to show you how to can homemade pulled pork. This recipe is super easy. So if you've never pressure canned before, that's probably going to be your biggest challenge, is learning how to use the pressure canner. The recipe for the pulled pork is actually really easy. Someone had emailed me and asked me if you could use this recipe just to make pulled pork without doing the canning part of it. And yes, you totally can use this just to make pulled pork. It makes a lot of pulled pork, so you're not going to be able to eat it all unless you are trying to feed a big crowd of people. But you could freeze this recipe also if you decided you didn't want to can it. So what I would do is just put it into serving size Ziploc freezer bags and put it in the freezer. So that's totally okay too if you want to use this recipe for just making pulled pork. Today I'll be talking about the difference between pressure canning and boiling water canning in case you're not sure what the difference is. I will go through the pressure canning process step by step, and I will also show you how to make homemade pulled pork. Here are some photos of my family and myself. We live on a small 1-acre homestead out in the country in Washington State. On the upper left-hand corner is a photo of my husband and I and our 3 boys. We also have 2 older daughters who are grown up and moved away. And we have chickens and ducks and things like that. We just have a small little homestead, but we enjoy gardening and canning the food that we garden. So you don't need to have a big farm to do this kind of stuff. If you have any kind of garden, or you can get produce from somebody else who has a garden, then you can can your food too. And I know it saves a lot of money to can your own food, and that is one of the reasons that I can my food. This is a photo of my canning supply in my basement. I actually have more than that down there now. This picture is from last year. These shelves are pretty much full right now. You might wonder why you would want to go to the effort to can this much food, but I do it for several reasons. One is for money reasons. If you're growing your own food, you're going to save a lot of money canning it. And I know this time of year, my husband and I are both self-employed, and this is our worst time of year financially because of the weather. And so this next month, we are going to be eating a lot of this food instead of going to the grocery store. So for food storage and emergency preparedness, it's a really good idea to have extra food on hand. And I also enjoy canning. Canning is a hobby for a lot of people. It can be a really fun hobby. And if that's something you're interested in, hopefully showing you how to do this will get you interested in a new hobby too, because I think it's really fun. And it's also healthier to eat homemade food also. Just quickly, I would like to share with you the difference between boiling water and pressure canning. There's two different kinds of pressure canners. I'm only going to show you one kind today. This is the kind that I use. On the left-hand side is a picture of a boiling water canner, and this is basically just a big pot that you boil water in, and you put your jars in and boil the jars in this big pot. So this is an actual boiling water canner, but you can actually do boiling water canning with any large stock pot that is tall enough to cover your jars with water. And so I will, in a few minutes, I'll tell you what kinds of things you would cook in a boiling water canner or can in a boiling water canner. But this is the kind of canning that a lot of people do. You may or may not realize that you can only can high acid foods in a boiling water canner. You need a pressure canner for canning meats and vegetables, and I'll explain why in a few minutes and give you examples of stuff that you would can in each kind. If you're canning for the first time and you're trying to decide which kind of canner to buy, if you're interested in canning meats and vegetables, I would just buy a pressure canner, because you can anything in a pressure canner. You can only can high acid foods in a boiling water canner. So you don't need to have both. If you have a pressure canner, you can can anything. So let me know if you have any questions about that in the comments there. And I will also talk a little bit more about it in a second here, about the differences. And this is a dial gauge canner. Or pressure canner. There are dial gauge pressure canners and weighted pressure canners. I bought this one on Amazon. I think they're between $60 and $70 to buy one of these. You might be able to find one at Walmart. It depends on the time of year that it is, to what, if the canning supplies are there or not. You might be able to find these year round, but you can always find them on Amazon. I'm going to send you after the workshop a supply list that has links to these things. So if you want to check them out yourself on Amazon, that you can. Okay, just a little bit behind the science of boiling water canning. Water is heated to 212 degrees, so that is the temperature that water boils. And so when you're using a boiling water canner, that is the hottest your water can get, is 212 degrees. And that temperature is sufficient to kill the bacteria in high acid foods. So when you're making jams and jellies and canned pears and peaches and things like that, 212 degrees is plenty hot to kill bacteria in those foods. So that is why you can just use a boiling water canner for those kinds of things. In a pressure canner, the pressurized steam that is created in the pressure canner heats up to 240 degrees. Now, this temperature is necessary to kill the bacteria that is present in low acid foods, which would be vegetables and meat. So that is that's the big difference between the pressure canner and the boiling water canner. The temperature gets higher in the pressure canner. So you need that higher temperature to kill bacteria in vegetables and meats. Now, this has been the confusing part for me, that high pH equals low acid. You may remember this from chemistry. I was never a big science person, but I think I'm finally understanding this now, that the higher a pH level that a food has, the lower the acid it has. So foods with pH levels higher than 4.6 need to be pressure canned. This isn't something you're going to know on your own, and probably something you're never even going to look up to see what the pH level is of a certain fruit or vegetable. But you really need to know these things when you're canning, and that's why it's really important to, when you're trying out new canning recipes, especially recipes you find online, you want to make sure that they're safe. And the safe recipes are recipes that have been tested by scientists. And so that doesn't mean that you can't find good recipes on the internet, but you will find recipes that have not been proven to be safe to be canned. And so you need to be careful about that. People will tell you that you can can milk and butter and things like that, and those are not safe to can. So make sure you check your sources. There's the National Center for Food Preservation is one of your sources that you can use online to check to see if recipes are safe. And the Ball Canning Book is always a good resource. I have based all of my recipes that I have from those two sources. So my recipes are also safe, and I will talk to you about that later after I show you how to can the pulled pork. High acid foods are generally fruits, jams and jellies, salsas, pickled foods, and you will notice that salsas and pickled foods actually have vegetables in them, but the reason they're safe to can in a boiling water canner is because the vinegar in them raises the acidity level. So that's why those are safe to can in a boiling water canner. Low acid foods are vegetables. Tomatoes are an exception. Tomatoes are a high acid vegetable, and I guess tomatoes actually are a fruit, but people do consider them vegetables. So you can tomatoes in a boiling water canner, but you also you cannot can meat in a boiling water canner. That's a low acid food. Another thing you need to take into consideration when you're canning is elevation adjustments. If you live above 1,000 feet in elevation, you need to increase your processing time for boiling water canning because it takes longer for water to boil at a higher elevation. And you also need to increase the amount of pressure that you're using when you're pressure canning. There are elevation adjustment charts in the Ball Canning Book, and you can also find them easily online. You just need to make sure when you're canning that you're using, because a lot of times the temperature or the pressures and the times that they give you they're assuming that you're below 1,000 feet. So if it doesn't say, you just assume it's for below 1,000 feet, and you need to adjust accordingly. I have these charts in my canning courses also. Excuse me. And if you don't know for sure what your elevation is, just search into Google what the city and state where you live, and it will tell you the elevation, because sometimes you might think you're below 1,000 feet and you might actually be a little bit above. Even if it looks like you live on flat land, you might not necessarily be low elevation. So just make sure to check that out if you haven't already. Okay, we're going to jump right into how to can pulled pork. And Darlena says, I live in BC, Canada. I've tried canning pork and chicken, and they have both turned out tough and stringy. I would like to know if you have to pressure cook. Oh, I'd also like to know if you have to pressure cook vegetable juice. I just got a KitchenAid juicer and want to make V8 juice. Those are very good questions. I will talk about the pulled pork as I am giving you the instructions for it. I will talk about that. And as far as the V8 juice goes, I do have a recipe for V8 juice in my canning courses. You can V8 juice in a boiling water canner. However, you have to use a certain amount of high acid versus the low acid vegetables to make it safe, because the tomatoes make it high acid, but you can't just put as many other vegetables in there as you want, or that would make it not acidic enough. So you could can it in a pressure canner to be safe, but you can do it in a boiling water canner if you use a certain amount of ingredients. And I do have that recipe in my canning courses. Okay, so here's how to can pulled pork. For this recipe, you're going to need 18 pounds of pork butt. That's what it's called. I don't know why they call it that, but that's actually what it says on the package is pork butt. And you also need 5 pounds or 80 ounces of barbecue sauce, which I just bought a big bottle of it. I do have a recipe in my canning courses for how to can homemade barbecue sauce. So you can use your own barbecue sauce. But for this recipe, you can buy everything at the store to make this. You don't have to grow anything necessarily to do this recipe. If you wonder why I'm canning pulled pork when you can just buy pulled pork, is mostly it is healthier for one thing because you know what's in it, and it's a lot less expensive. I will show you the price breakdown in a minute of how much it actually costs to do this. And you're also making a whole bunch of pulled pork at one time. You'd be surprised. One little pint of pulled pork is only 2 cups. There's 2 cups in the pint, but when you take it out, it actually expands and it feeds at least 6 people. So that is, you're making a lot of pulled pork. So this couple of hours, literally a couple of hours of work on the weekend, you're going to have pulled pork for at least 6 months. It depends on how much you eat it, but it lasts our family of 5 at least 6 months. We eat more of it in the summertime when we're camping and things like that. So for this recipe, you're going to need 18 pounds of pork butt and the 5 pounds of barbecue sauce. I shop at Cash and Carry. It's a wholesale grocer similar to Costco. It's smaller though, and they sell meat and stuff to restaurants. And so if you have access to a store like this that has larger quantities of meat like they would sell to a restaurant, that's probably why you want to look for this. It's on sale during different times of the year. I notice around Easter time, which is coming up, is when it is the cheapest that I've found. I've seen it as low as 99 cents a pound. I think the last time I bought this was at a different time of the year, and it was $1.50 a pound. So these 2 cuts of meat actually came in one package. So I got 18 pounds of pork in one package, and it was $27 for all of this meat. And I also saw that at Winco has 10 pounds of pork butt that you can buy at one time. And I don't think it was more than $1.50 a pound. So you might be able to find it at Winco too. So if you're looking at the price for this, it depends on if you already had barbecue sauce or if you have to go buy some from the store or not. But for what I paid to make this, it was around $35 for the barbecue sauce and the pork butt, which comes out to about $2.50 per jar, which I thought is really economical when one jar serves 6 people. And so, yeah, that's your cost. It's about $2.50 a jar, and you can probably do it cheaper if you have homemade barbecue sauce, or if you get your pork on sale, it'll be cheaper too. So this is the barbecue sauce I used this time. I don't use the same kind every time, but this is actually a 5-pound bottle of barbecue sauce of Sweet Baby Ray's. The flavor of this one is good. You can get the big bottles at Winco or at Costco or somewhere like that. So to make this recipe, you're going to need a pressure canner. You can't use the boiling water canner. You're going to actually have to have a pressure canner. And in case you're wondering, a pressure canner and a pressure cooker are not the same thing. You can't use a pressure cooker for this. A pressure cooking is just for cooking. The science behind a pressure cooker and a pressure canner is the same. They do the same thing. They both raise the pressure to raise the temperature to make it cook fast. But the difference is that you can't adjust or monitor the pressure in the pressure cooker. It doesn't tell you how many pounds of pressure you have, and you have to control that when you're pressure canning, and you can't do that with a pressure cooker. So that's why you never want to use a pressure cooker for canning. However, you can use a pressure canner for cooking, if that makes sense. You can use your pressure canner for canning or cooking. Some people don't choose to do that because it will get your pressure canner really messy if you cook a lot of food in it, and you can clog up your vent pipes with juice and stuff from your food going up in it. So if you choose to, you can use most pressure canners for cooking, but do not use your pressure cooker for canning. So let me know if you have any questions about that. You'll also need a ladle and a jar lifter to take your jars in and out of your canner, and a wide mouth funnel. Again, here is the dial gauge pressure canner that I use. I use mine a lot. There's different sizes of these. This one holds 9 quarts. Or 7 quarts. I can't remember now. it obviously holds more pint jars than it does quarts. I think it's 7. I think you can get 7 quarts in the size of a pressure canner. There are really large pressure canners that you can get. All American makes a huge pressure canner that you can put 2 layers of pint jars in. But they are not very safe to use on most stoves because they are so heavy, and sometimes they're too tall for some stoves if you have a cupboard above your stove. And so people usually use those outside on a propane burner. So that is an option. If you can't use if you have a large pressure canner that you can't use in your kitchen, you can use it outside on a propane burner. Some people do have canning kitchens that they set up outside, which are really neat. Another thing about pressure canners is if you have a ceramic stovetop, I would really question whether you should use a pressure canner on the ceramic stovetop. Some people do and haven't had any problems with it. The advice is to check with the manufacturer of your ceramic stovetop and make sure that see if they recommend it or not, because you can crack your ceramic stovetop if the heat is not being distributed the way it's supposed to, or if your pan is too big. I mean, there's a lot of factors. It's not very safe for your stove. You could break your stove, basically. Like it probably won't happen, but as expensive as stoves are, I probably wouldn't take the chance on it. Another problem, and I have actually tried to do it before on a stove I had at another house, and the problem that I experienced was that because the temperature is regulated differently in those kind of stovetops, your temperature is going to go up and down on your burner, and when that happens, your pressure goes up and down in your pan. And if your pressure in your pressure canner drops below a certain pressure while you're canning, you have to start the canning process all over again, and you don't want to do that. And it's really hard to regulate the temperature with this ceramic stovetop. So my advice, if you have a ceramic stovetop and you really want to can, would be to get a propane burner outside and use your canner outside. Then you don't have to worry about breaking your stove. This is what your jar lifter looks like. It's just some tongs that fit around your jars to take them in and out of the pan. A wide mouth funnel sits right in your jar so that you can put your food in there without any problems. Okay, so the first thing you need to do is decide how you want to cook your pork. You could cook it in the oven, or I choose to cook mine in a turkey roasting pan, an electric pan, because then I just threw those big pieces of meat in the roasting pan. You don't need to put any water in it or anything, and that is just fat that is coming out of the pork. So you just stick your meat in there, put it on 350 degrees, and cook it for about 6 hours. You can use a meat thermometer to make sure it's done. If for some reason it isn't completely done and you're not sure if it's done, I wouldn't worry about it too much because you're not going to eat it at this point. When you pressure can it, it is going to continue to cook. So if it's a tiny bit underdone at this point, it's not going to matter because it's going to continue to cook in the pressure canner. And I think that is the problem that Darlene is talking about with it becoming tough and stringy. It's because you're actually cooking it twice. You're cooking it here and you're cooking it in the pressure canner. And so it can turn out a little stringy sometimes. So you want to make sure that you don't cook it too long at this point, or you're just going to be cooking it way too long when you pressure can it. So, so you want it on the underdone side, not the overdone side. So after you cook it for about 6 hours, it's gonna just shred really easily. So there was no bones in this cut of meat, so you don't have to worry about taking any bones out. We just take 2 forks and shred it into the pork. If there's any big chunks of fat that you see or anything in there, just go ahead and remove that at this point, because anything that is left in here, you're going to be eating. So if you see anything in there that doesn't look edible, just take it out. And so you just want to shred it up, because however it looks like is what it's going to look like when it's on your sandwich. So shred it up really good. And then you want to stir your barbecue sauce in till a desired consistency. And this will also make a difference into whether it turns out tough or not when you are pressure canning it. There is no certain amount of barbecue sauce you want to have in it. I would err on the side of having a little bit too much barbecue sauce in it, because it's going to evaporate and cook off a little bit in the pressure canner and leave your meat a little bit dry. So you want to have lots of barbecue sauce. If you don't have enough barbecue sauce, you can put a little bit of water in it. It's okay to add water to it, because that's going to evaporate too when you're cooking it. So just remember that if it does, when it comes out of the jar, if it doesn't look exactly how you want it to, to look pretty enough to put on your sandwich or whatever, you can add barbecue sauce to it after you take it out of the jar to get it to the right consistency that you want. And that's what I often do, because you're going to lose some of your barbecue sauce when it's being pressure canned, so due to evaporation, and some more of it will evaporate when it's just sitting on the counter cooling off. So you totally can add more barbecue sauce to it before you serve it. So if you need add a little water to it to give it some more moisture. You're kind of just gonna have to make a judgment call on that. Like I said, because you're pressure canning it, you don't have to have a certain amount of meat or a certain amount of sauce. It's not gonna throw off your recipe or ruin anything. That's something you'll just do with practice, I think, to see what it's supposed to look like. But I would put a little bit more barbecue sauce in than what you think that it needs. And while your meat is heated, you want to, well, another thing too, if you don't have time to do this all in one day, but I have cooked my meat one day, and if you have room to put your meat in the refrigerator, you can put your meat in the refrigerator and take it back out the next day or two to can it. It does need to be hot when you put it in the jars, but you can heat it back up again. So if you don't have time, I mean, it was going to take you an afternoon to do this, maybe 3 or 4 hours total to, well, no, because you had cooked the meat for 6 hours. Yeah, it will take a whole day if you cook the meat and can it in one day. You're probably talking about 10 hours altogether. So if you don't have time to do it all in one day, there's different ways you could do it. You could put your meat in to cook and let it cook all night while you're in bed and sleeping, and do it in the morning. Or you can cook the meat one day, put it in the refrigerator, and then take it out the next day and heat it up again and then can it. So you could do this in 2 or 3 days if you need to. Just refrigerate the meat in between and heat it up again when you're ready to can it. Okay, so when you have your meat and barbecue sauce heated up and ready to can, you need to sterilize your jars, rings, and lids in the dishwasher. You can use pint jars or quart jars to can. There's different amount of processing time, whether it's quarts or pints. I will tell you what those different times are here in a few minutes. I have never found a need to can in quart-sized jars for my pulled pork, because even a pint of pulled pork doesn't look like a lot of meat, but when you take it out, it expands into a lot of meat. And even if you put quite a bit on your sandwich, I found that 1 pint feeds at least 6 people. So unless you have a large family, a pint-sized jar of pulled pork is probably plenty. And if it's only for a couple of people, that's enough for a couple of meals. So if you've never sterilized jars before, there's a couple different ways you can do it. I do it in the dishwasher because it's the easiest way to do it. The other way to do it would be to put them in boiling water on the stove, but that means you have to have another pan of water and another place on your stove to put a pan. And so this is a lot easier and takes up less room. So when I'm busy getting stuff ready to can, I'll put all my jars and rings and lids in the dishwasher. And then just leave them sitting there until you're ready to use them. You can reuse the rings and the jars, but you need to have new lids. You want to throw your lids away, or you can reuse the lids, but not for canning. Like if I'm going to put a jar of something in the refrigerator and I need a lid, you don't have to use a new lid for that. You can reuse lids. So I do reuse lids for that, but don't reuse a lid for canning more than one time. They're very inexpensive. At Walmart, you can get them for like $1.50 for a box of 12. So they're not expensive. Make sure you always have lots of extra lids on hand because you don't want to run out of lids in the middle of a canning project. That's no fun, especially if you live 20 miles away from the store like I do. That can be very inconvenient. So make sure you have lots of lids. And there's two different kinds of jars. There's small mouth jars and there's large mouth jars. It does not matter which one you use. I have both. So I have to make sure that I have lids of both sizes so that you have the right size when you need it. So while your jars are sterilizing in the dishwasher, you can fill your canner with about 3 inches of water and heat it till boiling. This is different than when you're using a boiling water canner. When you're using a boiling water canner, you cover your jars with water so that there's 1 inch of water above the jars. But that is not true with pressure canning. In pressure canning, it is not necessary to cover your jars with water. So you only need 3 inches of water, and it also depends on how many jars you have in the water, because you'll find if you fill this canner completely up with jars that the water is going to still go up above the jars, and you don't want that much water in there. So you don't need to have an exact amount of water in there. You're going to just kind of eyeball it, and generally what I do is after all the jars are in there, if the water is more than halfway up the jars, then I take water out until it's halfway or a little bit less above the jars, because you don't want too little water in there or it's going to boil out during the canning process, and you don't want that to happen. But you don't want too much water in there either. It doesn't need a lot of water to build up the pressure and the steam. So you want the water about halfway up your jars after the jars are in the water. And you also want to make sure that your jars are, when you put the hot food in your jars, that your jars are hot, and then you're putting them in hot water. The water doesn't have to be actually boiling when you put the jars of food in the water, but it does need to be hot, because if you put hot jars in cold water or cold jars in hot water, hot jars in cold water, your jars can break. And so the important thing is just make sure that everything is approximately the same temperature so that your jars don't get a big shock when you put them in there and get a big temperature change. Your water is going to be boiling at some point, but it doesn't have to be boiling now as long as it's hot. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions, feel free to type your questions in, and I will answer your questions as we go. So you want to ladle your pork out of the pan that you cooked it in and put it in your sterilized jars. So you actually are also adding hot water at this point. So you should have plenty of liquid in your jars. Between the barbecue sauce and the hot water, you're going to have quite a bit of liquid in there. So you want you pour hot water. It could be hot water out of your tap, or you can boil it on the stove, either one. It doesn't have to be a certain temperature. It just needs to be really hot so that your stuff stays hot when you put your hot jar in your hot pan of hot water. So if you're wondering what headspace is, the headspace is the amount of space between the top of your food and the top of the jar. And in a canning jar, if you see the rings around the top of the jar, 1 inch is approximately where the lowest line is. So you want to measure it to make sure. But headspace is very important when you're canning, and especially pressure canning. When you're pressure canning, the heat and the pressure in the jars causes your food to expand. And if your food expands too much, your jar can break, for one thing. And sometimes it won't break, but sometimes it will just keep your jar from sealing because the food will be so high that it's actually pressing up on the lid, and it keeps your jar from sealing. And so you don't want that to happen. So, and you don't want your jar to break either. Jars can break in pressure canners. I've had them explode in there before. Like, not the pressure canner itself exploding, but the jars can explode in the pressure canner. And that makes a big mess, to say the least. So make sure you use the right amount of headspace. Your recipe should always tell you how much headspace you need. Different kinds of foods require different amounts of headspace depending on how much they expand. Some foods don't, like jams and jellies, do not expand very much. So you only need a 1/4 inch headspace for those. So just make sure you're following the recipe, and it does matter. And some people have also told me that it is okay to have more than an inch head space. Like if you only had enough food to fill the jar half full, then they go ahead and can that. And that is not safe to do, because when you only have a jar half full, there is a whole bunch of air in there also, and there are germs in that air. And when even after you can it and get rid of the germs in there, there's still room in there for germs to grow in all that air. So there is a reason why there's a certain amount of food and a certain amount of air, and I don't understand it all, but all I know is that scientists have done lots of tests on this, and you really need to follow the directions exactly to make sure that it's safe. And that doesn't mean that you're 100% for sure going to get sick if you don't do it right, but if you don't do it right and you do get sick, you can get really, really sick. And so to me, it's not worth it. I don't want to make myself sick or somebody in my family or somebody who I give my food to sick. And so you definitely want to follow the directions just in case that small chance of something happening. And I mean, you have almost no chance of something bad happening if you follow the directions. Alrighty. You want to wipe the rims of your jars with a damp paper towel or a kitchen towel. This will keep, if you don't do this, your jars may not seal. And especially when you're working with meats, your meats can be a little greasy, and even just a plain paper towel is not enough to get the grease off of something. I've had this happen before where I wiped everything off with water and my towel really carefully, put my lids on there, and some of them still didn't seal. And I found out later it was because the grease, normal food and water will wipe right off, but grease will not necessarily all come off when you're just wiping it with water and a towel. And the way that you can get around this is by putting a little bit of vinegar on your towel or your dish towel and then wiping it with the vinegar. And the vinegar will actually cut through the grease and remove the grease to make sure that your jar seals. So if you're working with meat or anything that has grease in it, which would be meat, I guess, when you're canning, you want this little vinegar trick will make sure that you don't have any grease on top of your jars. So wipe them off really well. And you want to put your lids and your rings on your jars just finger tight. You don't want to tighten them really tight or tighten them too tight, because that can cause problems too. Just do it finger tight. They just barely need to be on there. The only purpose of the ring is just to hold that lid in place while it's canning. It doesn't need to be on there tight. You're going to process the jars at 10 pounds of pressure for 70 minutes for pints and for 90 minutes for quarts. Now I'll explain to you here the part of the pressure canner and how the pressure canner works. I've tried to label everything here. You see on the top of the pressure canner is the dial gauge, which tells you how much pressure is in the canner. The pressure regulator determines whether there's pressure building up in the pan or not, and I'll show you how that works in a second. The vent pipe is underneath the pressure regulator, and that's where steam can escape through the pan. And the lid lock tells you if the pan is locked or not, and if it's not locked, you cannot be building that pressure in your pan. It has to be locked. So I'll tell you how that works. So after you get your jars in there, let's see. As you can see, this pan had a little bit too much water in it. So yeah, you would actually take some of the water out of there. So the water's only halfway up the jar. And then you would put the lid on there. And there's arrows on the top that you have to line up. You have to line up the lid just right for it to click on there. And when you first put the lid on, the lid lock will be popped up. It'll be popped up about a ½ an inch. You'll be able to see it sticking straight out of there. And so that's how you know that there's no pressure in the pan. When the lid lock is up, it is safe to take the lid on and off the pan. If the lid lock is down, that means that it is locked and there's pressure in it, and you don't want to try to take the lid off when I've never even tried. I don't know if you can take the lid off when the lid lock is down, but you don't want to do that because there's a lot of pressure in the pan. So that's how you know if there's pressure in there or not. So when you first put the lid on there, the lid lock is going to be up, and you want to take the pressure regulator off of the vent pipe, and it's just sitting on top of it. You pull it off and you'll see the little pipe underneath there. And what you want to do is turn your temperature on your stove way up to high, to really high, like you're boiling water. And in about 10 minutes, you will see steam coming out through the vent pipe. That's how you know that your water is boiling and that your temperature is at the right temperature if you can see the steam coming out of the vent pipe. So you want the steam to come out of the vent pipe for 5 to 10 minutes after you start seeing the steam coming out. And when you see that steam, it is safe to put the pressure regulator on the vent pipe. And when you do that, the pressure will start building up in the pan. There was no pressure in the pan until you put the pressure regulator on there. And when that happens, it traps the steam back down in the pan. The steam starts building up and the lid lock will pop up. So when the lid lock pops up, you know that it's building pressure. At this point, you are going to watch the dial gauge and you're going to see that the pressure is raising. Now for this recipe, I think it said you needed 10 pounds of pressure. So you want to wait until it's 10 pounds of pressure. You cannot set your timer for the recipe until your pressure is at the correct pressure. You will see that once it gets up to 10 pounds, it starts going up really fast, and you don't want it to go up to 10, past 15 pounds of pressure, because you don't want to build up too much pressure in your pan. That's not safe. So when it starts getting close to 10 pounds, you want to start turning your temperature down. By the time your temperature and your pressure is stable, you're going to have your temperature turned down to low, but you don't want it to be too low. So you just need to watch the pressure gauge, and when it's at 10 or 11 pounds pressure and it stays there, it's not going up anymore, it's not going down anymore, then you just have to keep adjusting your temperature on your stove until it is the correct temperature and the pressure is not changing anymore. It takes a few minutes to get it right at that level where it stays there. And then you shouldn't have to adjust it anymore for the entire time. You just need to get it so that it's at the right pressure and it's not changing anymore. And if your pressure ever does drop below what the recipe says, you're supposed to turn your temperature up, get it back up to the right pressure, and start your timer over again. And you don't want to do that because that cooks your food 2 times, and you don't want to do that again if you don't have to. But you do need to do that if it drops below the correct pressure. So once you get it up to the correct pressure, that is when you turn your timer on. For this recipe, it was 70 minutes or 90 minutes, depending on if it was pints or quarts. And so you set your timer and just keep an eye on it once in a while. Make sure that it hasn't dropped below the correct pressure or that it's not going up too high. You might need to turn it down or turn it up just a little bit. And after the timer goes off, all you need to do is turn the temperature or turn your stove off. Just turn it off and walk away and let it sit there. You don't want to open the pan or do anything. Just let it sit. And as the pan cools down, probably in about 15 or 20 minutes, the lid lock will go down. And when the lid lock goes down, then it is safe to open your pan. And when you open your pan, you may see something like this in there. A lot of times the juice will come out of it siphons out of your jar basically and into the pan, and it looks like maybe a jar broke. But if there's no food in the pan, you're probably safe. It's just your liquid that came out of the jar, and that's why your meats and stuff can get a little bit dry when you're canning, because everything gets siphoned back out of it. I have to say that not every time, but sometimes my meat has turned out a little dry, and I've looked at it and gone, oh my gosh, that doesn't look good, and I can't eat that now. But you'd be surprised it's not going to burn. It doesn't burn. It just gets a little dry. So if you just add extra barbecue sauce to it after you take it out of the jar, then it will totally change the consistency of it, and it shouldn't be as dry. And another note about heating your pulled pork back up to eat after you take it out of the jar, you never want to eat something that came out of your pressure canner straight out of the jar. It needs to be heated up again before you eat it. So don't eat your pulled pork straight out of the jar after you open it. It needs to be heated up again to be safe to eat. So make sure you heat it before you serve it, which you probably would anyway. And this is what it looked like when it came out. As you can see, it is very compact. It presses together very tightly in the jar, and that's why when you take it out of the jar, there's a lot more pulled pork in there than you think there is. It really decompresses when you take it out. And like I said, mix some more sauce in it to give it more of the texture that you want. You don't want to disturb your jars while they're cooling. you'll be able to see when you take them out of the canner that the water is actually still boiling in the jars. It takes quite a while for it to cool down all the way when you take them out. It takes hours for them to cool off completely. So just let them sit until they cool. Usually when you're pressure canning, your jars will seal in the canner, but it's possible for them not to be sealed when they come out. You may hear a pinging noise, and that means that they're sealed. You can tell if a jar is sealed or not by pressing your finger down in the middle of the lid. And if your lid goes down and up again, then it is not sealed. But if it's flat and doesn't move when you touch it, then it is sealed. If it is not sealed right away, I would give it a half an hour or so, and when it cools down, it will seal as it's cooling. If you do end up having a jar too that don't seal because they had something on the rim of the jar or whatever reason, you can still eat it. It's still safe to eat. You just need to put it in the refrigerator and eat it in the next week. But if your jar is sealed, then you can store it for 1 to 2 years in your basement in a cool, dark place or in your cupboard. And so I think that's it for the pulled pork. So let me know if you have any questions. If I said anything that was confusing, you can email me or type in the questions down there. I just wanted to tell you a little bit real quick about my other canning courses. The presentation that I just gave you for canning pulled pork, that entire video and the instructions like I just gave you are included in my canning courses. My canning courses are individual courses that tell you how to can different types of foods. The pulled pork course is in there. And the other things that you can can in your pressure canner that I can teach you how to can are baked beans and bean ham soup, beef stew. You can can raw fish and raw chicken, which is very quick to do. You put the raw meat in your jars and you pressure can it, and it turns out wonderful. You can can homemade chicken broth, green beans, mushrooms, potatoes, squash, spaghetti with meat, pulled pork, greens, and dry beans. Someone says that canned meat will last longer than 1 to 2 years. I do agree with that. The experts say 1 to 2 years because they don't want you to keep it for 10 years and assume that it's still safe. But many people say that their canned goods will last longer than that and that it's still good to eat. And that is up to you to decide. But that is true that it will last for more than 1 to 2 years. That's just to be on the safe side. And meat will smell bad. If your meat is bad, when you open it up, if it smells really bad, just don't eat it. That's your first clue that you shouldn't eat it. If you're interested in boiling water canning, and if you don't want to invest the money in a pressure canner, you can buy a boiling water canner for about $30 to make jams, jellies, salsas, sauces, fruit, applesauce, and pie fillings. And I also show you how to make all of those in my canning courses. These are I'll show you the different things that you can learn how to make. In my courses, all of your favorite recipes are in one place, so you don't have to search all over the internet for recipes. You don't have to wonder if they're safe or not because they've all been approved by the National Center for Food Preservation. Each course is complete from start to finish. It will tell you how to make one recipe and can one kind of food. And so you don't have to jump around to different videos to figure out how to do something. Every step is shown step by step, just like I just showed you. And I also have a Facebook group that you can join that is just for canning, where you can ask questions to other people or with me. I'm in there and you can ask me questions. And you can also email me with your questions if you have any questions. In my courses, there are 58 different foods that you can learn how to can, and I will be adding more as I find more things to add. There's your Facebook group for support, a 30-day money-back guarantee. You can get all of your money back if you're not totally happy with the courses. If you sign up today, you'll also get 8 free ebooks, which are a $56 value. And I'm also offering today my 7 baking courses, which I'll show you what those are in a minute here. And those are also a $50 value, which all of this free stuff is worth more than what I'm charging for the course. So this is the stuff that you can learn how to can in my courses. I can show you how to can grape juice, grape jelly, bread and butter pickles, apple pie filling, chicken broth, rose petal jelly. Rose petal jelly is really fun if you have wild roses around you that you can use in the spring. Blackberry syrup, cinnamon pears, apple butter, baked beans, apple pie jam, barbecue sauce, which you could use to make this pulled pork, is really good. Beef stew, bean and ham soup, chili, green beans, raw fish you can, Mountain Dew jelly, pickled jalapenos, homemade orange marmalade, pizza sauce, potatoes, pomegranate jelly, the pulled pork I just showed you, the spaghetti sauce, and this salsa is the best salsa recipe that you'll find. People tell me all the time this is the best salsa they've ever had. It took me a long time to find this recipe and to perfect it. And so I think this recipe is worth the cost of the course because you're not going to find it anywhere else. And it's really, really good. And your friends will all want it too. You can learn how to make split pea soup, tomato soup, sweet and sour sauce, which is also really good. Tomatoes, winter squash, chicken, pickled beets, strawberry rhubarb jam. You can can dry beans, strawberry basil vinaigrette, strawberry lemonade concentrate to make strawberry lemonade, strawberry lemonade jam, strawberry mango jam, hot dog relish, which is made from green tomatoes, pickled asparagus, which is another one of our family favorites, peach salsa, mint jelly, blackberry jelly, plum jelly, peaches, cherry jam, cherry pie filling, peach pie filling. I don't think there was a picture of the V8 juice in there, but there is a recipe for V8 juice, which that is really good too. And I actually use that V8 juice to make homemade chili and stuff too, so you can use it for other things besides just drinking. Each course contains step-by-step instructions on how to make that recipe. Each recipe has a video at 7 to 10 minutes long, a downloadable recipe, and a downloadable supply list. The cost today for the 58 canning courses is only $99, and you also get the 7 baking courses and the 8 ebooks with that for free. If you're wondering how that cost compares to other courses, you won't find another course exactly like mine online. I've looked around at my competition to see what's out there, and I have not seen any canning courses for $100 for pressure canning. You can, between $100 and $200, you can find courses that will show you basic boiling water canning if you just want to learn how to make jams and jellies or salsa. But I haven't seen any courses that include pressure canning and boiling water canning for $100. So that is a really good price. If you're wondering what the baking courses are all about, I have videos to show you step-by-step how to make cinnamon rolls, pretzel rolls, 1-hour dinner rolls, Olive Garden breadsticks, Hawaiian rolls, no-knead dinner rolls, and garlic pull-apart bread. And you'll get access to these for free when you purchase my canning courses. I know it's hard to see these on your screen, but these are the ebooks that I have available. I have an ebook of all of my cleaning product recipes. There's about 40 recipes for how to make your own cleaning products. I have cookie recipes, holiday recipes and crafts, quick bread recipes, mix recipes, which is like my ranch dressing mix, my guacamole seasoning, my taco seasoning mix. There's about 50 recipes for your own mixes in there, brownie mix, that kind of thing. I have a book for crockpot recipes, homemade salad dressing recipes, and zucchini recipes. So you don't normally get these when you buy my courses, but if you order them today, then you will get all of these free with the baking courses. Mary said about the courses that she just enrolled in the lifetime course package. She said, I'm such a chicken when it comes to canning, but I'm going to try to plunge in when my garden comes to harvest this year. Another thing I'm not terribly great at. That's something else we talk about in my Facebook group too, in my canning Facebook group. We can talk about gardening things too if you're having trouble with something in your garden. So that is a good resource for that. And she says, thank you for making your courses affordable. Donna said, I'm enjoying the canning classes. I want to thank you for your tip regarding Ultra Gel. I bought some and I just love it. I've been using it a lot. Thanks again for all the great help you offer. If you're wondering what Ultra Gel is. That's a secret ingredient in some of my recipes that you need to make it turn out the way you want it to, especially your pie filling. So that is something I talk about in my courses. And just a quick peek in the course. We're almost done here, I promise. If you click on the link below the video that you're watching of me right now, there's a link to click and enroll in the courses. If you've already created a username, if you've ever taken one of my free courses or you just created an account and you didn't purchase, you don't need to create a new account. All you need to do is scroll down to the bottom where it says log in, and then it will take you to the payment page. But if you've never created an account before, then this is where you will create an account and go to the next page. And you can use a credit card to pay, or you can use PayPal to pay. And once you log into the courses, it will list all of the courses in alphabetical order. That shows the altitude adjustment charts here. And then for each recipe, there is an instructional video. It tells you how long the video is, so you know how long it'll take to watch. They're anywhere from 7 to 10 minutes. And then there's the recipe, which is a PDF file, and a supply list, which is a PDF file. And you can view those online, or you can download them and print them out. If you want to put together a recipe booklet or something of all the recipes, you can print the recipes out. So all 58 recipes are in there. You can do them one by one. You can skip around, do them in whatever order you want. And the same with the baking courses. The baking courses, you have to log in to a different section of my school, but the baking recipes are set up exactly the same way. There's a video and a recipe for each baking course also. So again, you can enroll by clicking the button beneath the live workshop window. Don't want to miss out on the opportunity to get access to my new baking courses. I'll be adding to those baking courses in the next couple of months, and as and those baking courses are normally $50, and you will always have access to them as I add new courses to my canning classes or my baking classes. You will automatically get access to all of them. You'll never have to pay for them again. When you log in, you will see any new courses that I've added, and I also send out an email letting you know when I add new classes so that you'll know if I added any or not. So this is a good opportunity to get my baking classes for free and all my new classes for free. You can contact me through my website, and if you haven't already signed up for my weekly newsletter, you can do that at creativehomemaking.com. On Pinterest, I'm Homemaking Mom. On Instagram, Creative Homemaking, and on Twitter, I am my username is Homemaking. So you can connect with me there. Let me see if I can get myself back up on the screen here. Oh, here I am. Oh, all my technology worked today. That's pretty exciting. It doesn't cooperate with me sometimes. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comment box there. You can ask me questions about the workshop or my courses or my baking courses, anything you need to know. You can type the question in the box there, or you can email me after I log off here. That would be fine too. My baking courses and my free ebooks will not be available after this workshop. So if you want to be able to get those for free, you need to sign up today. I will be giving some more workshops in the next couple of months, probably canning and baking workshops. I will try to be having some new bonuses too, so they'll have different things to offer each time. So it's not always the same thing, but I'll be working on that. So let me know if you have any questions. I hope you enjoyed the class today. After I log off here, I will put together the replay video to send out in case you missed the first part, or if you had to leave in the middle of it, that you can watch it again later. You'll have 2 days to watch the video again, and if you miss it after the 2 days, it won't be available anymore. But a similar video, it's not the exact same video, but a similar video with the step-by-step instructions is in my canning courses, so you can watch it in there anytime you want. And like I said, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee, so if you log in and you look at everything and you decide it's not for you and not what you were looking for, you have 30 days to get a full refund without any questions asked, so you have nothing to lose. And you also get to keep the free bonuses too, even if you get your money back. So if you have any questions, let me know. I'm going to log off here. I will continue to check the questions on the screen here. So even after I log off, I can still see your questions if you want to leave me any questions on the workshop page here, or you can email me. So thanks for joining me here today. Thanks for bearing with me. Hopefully I didn't give you too much information. That's hard for me to tell sometimes. I try to keep it to an hour, and it looks like it wasn't exactly an hour, so I did pretty good. So I will be giving another workshop sometime in the next month. Not sure what about yet. If you have any ideas for workshops you'd like to see, feel free to leave that in the comments or email me and let me know about that too, because I love to help you guys learn whatever it is that you want to learn how to do. So keep in touch. Thanks for joining me today, and I will see you again soon.